Well,
Well,
here we
hello.
are.
Welcome, big warm welcome back to our listener.
Yes, yes. Welcome to our water cooler chats. Very low budget, very mindful.
Sort of demure,
Yes, some would say.
some
Some
would
would,
say.
yeah, yeah. One of us wears makeup. I won't say who.
And I feel like winter is set in because I feel like my face is the same color as my white, like the white door.
Oh, yeah,
It's fine. Maybe I need a different background for some contrast.
yeah. You could put like a Hogwarts background.
Oh, okay. I'll get right on that.
Yes.
Okay, what are we
Okay.
going to talk about today, Aleesa?
Well, um, I sent you a couple quotes from a book. Okay. So this book, I heard about it back in grad school a long time ago, by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Um, Viktor Frankl, if our listener is unaware, um, he is from Austria and he survived a couple concentration camps during the Holocaust. So his book Man's Search for Meaning talks about logotherapy, which he developed, and like some of the implications of like finding meaning among suffering. So
Mhm.
I put it on hold at my local library. Apparently, everyone's reading it right now. Who would have thought?
These are the times.
Yeah, I'm like, why do 15 people have this on hold in Fort Worth? Like,
Maybe it's like a school assignment or something.
maybe, yeah. They're like, you're gonna have to wait 6 weeks for it, and I was like, you know what? I have 6 weeks to wait. Like,
Yeah.
it's all good. So I put it on hold. Then at my gym, we have this bookshelf where people can like put books they don't want anymore, and like book exchange library type of thing. And I looked, and it said "Man's Search for Meaning." Frankl
No
at my
way.
gym. Yeah, I was like, I'm snatching that puppy up, and it's smaller than I thought.
Yeah, it's not a long book.
No, it's just a little thing. So yeah, it won't take me 6 weeks to read it. So
It's
um
kind of an OG therapy book. Like I feel
yes.
like it gets assigned a lot if you're going to go through grad school. But I was talking to my dad maybe about this podcast, I don't know, and he was like, "What is that book?" And I was like, "Oh, like it's not something every single person has read. I guess I just like default assumed it was so common,
Yeah.
but since it's not something everyone has read, it's good to talk about because I think there's some interesting points
Yes. Yeah.
to explore."
Yeah. So the first half of it is him talking about his experiences in the concentration camps. And
Yeah.
this book isn't like the graphic material that you can find in other books about the Holocaust. Like he a lot of the times is like, yeah, and then this happened and I'll spare you of the details. Like it's not a graphic account or anything like that. It's just kind of like his mental process of like him witnessing, for example, people's every possession being taken away from them, or he says that he told a guard, like, I have like my thesis draft in my pocket here. This is my life's work. Like, can you make an exception? Like, I cannot lose these documents. And the guy kind of like laughed in his face.
Yeah.
And so someone losing like everything they have and everything, like him making sense of that, and or a lot of times he would envision conversations with his wife and kind of like the hope that they would meet again and stuff like that. So like him finding some sort of meaning of like perseverance and stuff through the suffering
Mhm.
is like what he's talking about. And then the second part is about logotherapy, which is that concept of like seeking meaning despite suffering. Full disclosure, I haven't read the second half yet. I'm still in the throes of the first half, but I found a few quotes that I did share with you, that I want to talk about. So
Wait, can I ask a follow-up question? I think you already said this. Is he a psychologist by profession? I can't remember.
he,
What was his
he's a he's a psychiatrist.
psychiatrist? Okay.
Yeah, like MD and everything.
Yeah, but at
Mhm.
the time when he was studying, like you have to think about like the different types of therapy. Like therapy itself and psychiatry and psychology are all sort of still in their infancy, and people are like having all these theories about how psychology works. So
Yeah. Hmm.
he's
Yeah.
interesting, has an interesting take on it.
Yeah, like the counseling profession definitely didn't look like how it looks today.
Correct.
Yeah. So like Carl Rogers's stuff, Carl Rogers was writing some of his material, I think, like in the 50s and
Mm-hmm.
60s and stuff. So yeah, I'd have to look back. Actually, I have Carl Rogers's biography on my desk. So Carl Rogers was born in 1902. So yeah, a lot of this was likely being written at the same time. I mean, Carl Rogers would have been 40 something while the Holocaust was going on. So
Exactly.
yeah,
And Frankl lived from 1905 to 1997. Here's for our listener. Here's his picture. If
there he
anybody,
is.
I don't think anyone watches this video, but
Here's another
oh, good.
person. Yep.
He seems
That's
like he
Viktor
has
Frankl.
a kind
This
face.
this is Carl Rogers for reference.
They all wear glasses. I gotta
Yeah.
get glasses on.
So, anyways, yeah, Carl Rogers, I mean, he was probably writing books at the same time as Viktor Frankl.
Yeah.
Had I been prepared for this episode, maybe they met and maybe they did a collab on some stuff. I don't know.
A fun follow-up.
The interesting thing about like holding these two books is that Irving Yalom, who is still alive, he was like a big existential therapist person, right? And Viktor Frankl is typically like under the umbrella of existential therapy. So yeah, but anyways, he talks about the different people that he was like collaborating with and how they would have like splits and stuff like that
Mm-hmm.
and things. So yeah, that's something else I found interesting. That as he like, engaged in some research and stuff like that. But
How would you define existential therapy?
um existential therapy is like the big questions of life. Like, why do we exist?
Man search for meaning.
Yes, yep. Why do we exist? What is like a legacy type of thing, yeah, I
Well,
think.
I think of it too like it's like the macro question about humanity and all
Mhm.
those big questions, but then the micro question being like, how does your orientation to meaning
Yeah.
affect your own individual psychology and your own life experience as an individual? Because like we have collective beliefs and then we have individual experiences underneath those. So it's
Hmm.
both.
Yeah. And like no two people's realities are the same,
Yeah,
you
it's
know?
wild.
It is. Yeah. So yeah, it existential therapy is really interesting. And like it brings in a lot of grief work too, like depending on what you believe about the afterlife and stuff like that. Like Carl Rogers, he's all about like humanistic therapy and like recognizing that the client is the expert and we are fellow journeyman kind of type of person-centered stuff, the client knows their goals and like we're kind of just like walking alongside them, using empathy, using some like, lightness to help suffering be palatable,
Yeah,
mhm,
it's definitely not high control dynamics
mhm,
telling you how to make sense of the world, and we
mhm.
definitely know what it is. Like I feel like it's almost like polar opposite in some ways of some of the more rigid sociological belief systems that define all of those answers for humans and then tell them they have to believe them versus like Rogers is like we don't know, and that's like sort of our flexible philosophy question, I think, is like a little more open-minded about all of this.
Yeah, like there are many paths, you
Yeah.
know yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I find that to be freeing because it just like reduces judgment about how people live or how people think and stuff like that. And kind of like I've been working a lot myself on like leaning into some uncertainty, like, yeah, I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. But like coming from a religious background, uncertainty is really hard to sit with, because like everything had an answer or like, there were times where I was told you have to know this answer because when you're standing in front of God, he's going to ask this and you need to be prepared for that. And like your eternity depends on you knowing this. Like that's scary,
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially when you're brought up to believe that that should be scary.
Yeah. And that reminds me of this book The Sin of Certainty by
I think I've heard.
um Peter Enns.
Oh
He
yeah.
runs the Bible for Normal People podcast. Yeah. But yeah, the Sin of Certainty is so interesting. Like
Yeah.
because yeah, he's kind of like, there's flexibility even like in the way God designs things. Like
But if you had a fundamentalist of any religion listening to what we're saying, they would hate what we're saying.
they wouldn't have made it this far.
It's just so interesting how different people's perspectives can be. Also, in a lifetime, you can change, but like what we're saying feels very makes sense and feels like adaptive to me, but like in fundamentalism, it is literally poison to feel that
Mm-hmm.
way. Like it's
Yeah.
literally like the death of your soul to not have certainty and to choose wrong. It's like this or that, and if you choose wrong, it's over versus like there's many paths that all get the same place. Like I don't know, it's just so yeah, I think it's interesting how different people can be in
Yeah.
their beliefs.
Well, people tend to like really try to avoid doubt, you know?
Sure.
Yeah. And questioning, because like, if you have a system that's set up and you start like chipping away at it, it can like get really fragile. So like when everything that you stand on depends on some of that, and then you start like chipping away at the pieces or entertaining some other thoughts and stuff like that, like you run the risk of losing everything. And like it's not a pleasant experience. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So well, um,
You want to read one of the quotes?
yes. All
Okay.
right. Here's one of them. Okay, I thought of you specifically when I read this. Okay. Forces beyond your control can take away everything you possess except one thing: your freedom to choose how you will respond to the situation. You cannot control what happens to you in life, but you can always control what you will feel and do about what happens to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that actually came from the introduction of this book, which is by Harold Kushner. It's in like the introduction. So yeah, reading that, like as he was reflecting on Viktor Frankl's experiences and stuff, just like all sense of control and identity and belonging and like everything was just stripped away from people in a matter of time. Yeah. Um,
Not the same, but similar to going through a cancer diagnosis, which is
yes.
so radical and changes so much. And then it's like, I do think that that like echoes radical acceptance and commitment therapy, which is like, I'm grateful to have the professional like reading and training and awareness of like that as a coping skill because exactly that quote feels so useful to me that like this happens and it sucks. And also, what are we going to do to survive it? Which is like choose what you can control the controllables and then like you have to accept the rest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nothing else to do but find acceptance and then work as hard as you want to on anything that you think is changeable.
Yep. Yeah. Well, like you told me, you're like, I'm in this support group now for your cancer. And you're like, I didn't sign up for this.
No.
Like, how did I end up here? Like, yeah. And so it's like, I don't know, if you're always grasping for control of the stuff, or, no, I don't accept that someone's taking away my thesis documents and like my life's work and stuff like that. Like, sometimes accepting it and recognizing like, you have an internal locus of control where like you can decide how you react to stuff, like, and no one can take that away. It's empowering and stuff. And yeah, just like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I've been like starting to make some comparisons to other life situations, which I think, yeah, not everyone goes through cancer, thankfully, but like we all go through these iterations in our lives. And usually there's some dramatic ones that are high grief, high suffering. And like I think about the parallel to having a religious deconstruction and deconversion experience, which isn't the same as cancer, but like I didn't sign up for that group either. And in
Mm,
many ways, I feel like that happened to me and it was devastating. And then I went through all these very difficult periods of like reclaiming my life and figuring out what I could control. And like, so I feel like part of this cancer thing is I've done things before where life got turned upside down without a choice. And like, it's not that the tools will be exactly the same, but I have found my way before. So
Hmm.
it's not like the first time life has ever been turned upside down. And I don't think anyone gets through life without their life being turned up. People are going to die, people are going to have grief, people are going to have tragedy. It's just part of life.
Yeah.
So,
I feel like it's like in your life, you didn't sign up for fundamentalism either. Like you were
right.
born into it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then something happened where, you didn't sign up for exiting either, but like you found yourself in that situation, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. And it's kind of like, you've just like gone through life and like so many things were already decided for you, or like that's at least my experience. Like so many things were already decided and stuff like that. Or like if I did make a decision, the life that I would live like in that community that I decided to join, everything was decided there, and not by me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, going through like all these experiences where it's kind of like things are just kind of like happening to you. And then like having the language to say, okay, there are still things that are within my control, even though this is what's happening on the outside. Like, I think it's empowering.
Do you
And
know? Okay. Okay.
I was just gonna say, I'm glad to have the language for it. Like,
Yeah. I
mhm,
mean, if you're going to go through something, it's nice to have a roadmap or start to construct one or based on other roadmaps that have worked before to like try to piece together a meaning making system.
mhm, yes.
Okay, kind of a tangent, but it just occurred to me the earliest life experience I think that I had that made me impressionably was like, oh, sometimes life gets really hard was that when my grandpa was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis when
Mm,
I was like before I was born, like maybe right around the time I was born. And so growing up, I didn't really know him in full health. Like
mm,
as I aged, his body deteriorated like over decades. So it was common to go visit them and for a while he was in a wheelchair and then he was in a bed and then
mhm,
he couldn't talk. And so I never really had a lot of conversations with him because he would be unable to like his vocal cords and all like he it's a was a lot of suffering and at the time I was a kid and I didn't really realize like I was not afraid of it. It was just like that's how granddad is, that's just part
mm,
of his life. But around like middle school I think I started to realize like oh like that's really tragic what's happened in his life and started to think like if I'm going to go for a jog, I'm going to enjoy using my legs because that's not a promise. And so I don't think it ever occurred to me until just recently that that like little seed of gratitude and like being in the present moment and being like grateful for whatever it is that you have because you don't know what you will have later has always been from probably that experience on has like really been there. And I don't just like also know if I'm also a deep thinker and I'm always thinking about death or whatever anyway.
we already proved that.
Yeah, I just feel like I was always already thinking about it. So
Yeah. Hmm. The
maybe
only thing,
it's me.
this is like so minuscule in comparison, but like I'm thinking of when you have a stuffy nose and you are like, breathing is a possibility, because it's just like so hard to remember that when you are stuffy and stuff like that. So when you get rid of the cold and everything, you're just like, I can't believe I can breathe now. But like you end up getting so used to breathing that like you forget what it's like to be in the stuffiness, until it comes back around. And then you're like, why did I take breathing for granted? you know? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I
So,
guess, do you think there's a spectrum of people and how they land on that? Like, I think some people think about death and gratitude and like, oh my God, I'm so glad I can see the sky today all the time. And I think some people like never think about it and they
yeah,
just go on
probably.
their life.
Well, like, how, like, you and I went to grad school to like be able to list off coping skills and ideas for people and stuff to experiment with and stuff. So, like, gratitude journaling, I forget that that's not something that the general population knows about. but like the research behind just like gratitude journaling and identifying a few things every day that you're grateful for, that like really affects people's depression symptoms for the good, so it reduces their depression. So like I think try to kind of just like incorporate all these skills into our lives, but like the general population is like, oh, I never thought about doing that before,
That's
and
true.
so yeah, I think like our reality is different. It's like we live in this coping skill bubble
I
sometimes.
agree.
Like that's all we talk about, that's all we read about and stuff. And so yeah, like
True. Yeah, even just like grief or processing hard emotions or learning to feel a feeling go through your body. Like there's so many things I probably default assume everyone else already is thinking about and they are not because they're not in this field.
yes, yeah,
Huh.
yeah. Or it's like, if you just mention, like, all right, let's say you're at your kid's band concert, okay? And they give you the microphone and you're like, all right, everyone, I'm going to teach you this skill. I call it the mini, right? People would be like, what the heck? What is that to calm the vagus nerve? It's
Yes.
yeah. So anyways, but
Yeah.
it's yeah.
These weird tips and tricks that we pick up on because we've been doing it with
Yep.
people and like reading books and books and looking at research.
Yes. Okay, what's the actual name for the mini in case our reader would like to look
Okay.
it
So I stumbled upon this maneuver. It's called the Valsalva maneuver,
up?
and it can potentially help with panic attacks. Um, because you you hold your nose and then you blow, like you hold your nose but you blow like you're trying to blow but you can't because you're holding it, and then you apply some pressure all the way down to like your pelvic floor, so you want to like feel like you're blowing up a balloon in your body but the air is not going anywhere, and that is supposed to quickly reduce your blood pressure. So apparently paramedics do that sometimes if someone has really high, like if they're having a heart arrhythmia or whatever, they'll have them do that. So also you listen, check with your doctor because I think it can really lower your blood pressure. But there are these like physiological tricks that I've learned being a therapist because you get nervous doing therapy for someone. You're like, oh my God, I'm so anxious about this job. And then you have to learn how to calm your body down
Yeah.
because you don't want to be over there freaking out that you don't know what you're doing while
Mm.
you're trying to help them and be like, you know, the professional. So yeah, I feel like we really have learned a lot. Probably.
What that happens to you? I have no idea what
Oh,
you're talking.
you never get nervous doing this job.
No, I'm an expert at this point.
Oh my gosh. It's
No, I'm
so
just kidding.
funny.
We all, yeah, like we're human. It's just, but yeah, I think, yeah, definitely. People's outlooks are so different, just as everyone can have a different reality because we've all had different past experiences that are culminating to the present moment. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, people's, ability to pull from different skills or like just have words to put to something, or like
Yeah.
a super elementary therapy intervention for me is to like pull up a feelings wheel and have people like familiarize themselves with feelings vocabulary and like, what are you actually feeling? Like, because people are just like, I'm just mad, you know, or like, it feels sucky, but I'm like, okay, what are some other words that you might be noticing, because so when someone's like, that like I actually feel really embarrassed because of what happened. Okay, like that's a lot more vulnerable than just like I'm
Yes.
mad, And
Yes.
so like working on like what the actual emotion is that the person's feeling. To me, I'm just like yeah, isn't that common sense, like to say what you're feeling? But no, like that's actually a skill that like it's taken me years to develop for myself.
Yeah.
So introducing it to someone, like yeah, it might be the first time that they're hearing about that when you know
Yeah.
you might be quick to write it off as common sense or something, but
It's so basic to have someone reflect on, like we just say, like, I'm mad or whatever, and then they stay in the moment. But then, like, that's the magic of therapy is that you're in that room and you ask a follow-up question that they probably wouldn't ask of themselves, which is like, okay, can we sit and look at what that means? What is
mhm.
mad? And then there's all these ways you can pull apart, like being embarrassed. Well, what happened? Well, what is the belief about yourself, CBT, or how do you feel that in your body if it's somatic? And then people become more experts on their own experience by spending some time with those emotions that they normally wouldn't. And then it
Hmm.
benefits them forever because they now are more aware of what it means to feel mad or
Yes.
embarrassed.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
such a good thing.
Yeah. And it could like the work is vulnerable. Sometimes it's hard to sit with the embarrassment rather than just sitting with like I'm mad and I hate that, whatever. It's vulnerable work, but like, you kind of build up a tolerance for it, you build up an awareness for it, and like you see the benefit in doing that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, I have a question back to the meaning making for you.
Okay.
Okay, so how do you see people's meaning making search or system or whatever impact their therapeutic outcome or how they're doing? Like, if you could conceptualize from the existential therapy of like man's search for meaning, how does it impact people on an individual level?
Mm,
Or how does it impact you personally if you don't want to do work?
like so how does people's search for meaning impact them on an individual level? Like,
I guess if Viktor Frankl was here with us today, what would we be saying about his concept?
um, I feel like so like DBT, radical acceptance, like it all kind of like falls into the same thing. Um, there is like some research regarding like hope in therapy, like realistic hope, not like toxic positivity, like I'm
Mhm.
gonna cure you or something like that, but like realistic. I believe that there is life after this, that I can move forward. There are possibilities, Um, in grad school, I had this amazing professor that would always talk about untapped resources, and it's just kind of like filling yourself with like there's possibility, there's stuff that I haven't tried yet, or just like the willingness and openness to entertain something new. I think disrupts a lot of the pervasive patterns that people are living with that like become distressing, so like my practice is called hopeful feedback because hope is like a really important aspect of like therapeutic outcomes, and like I'm always hopeful that someone could reach their goals or something like that. But it doesn't mean it doesn't take work. A lot of times people do have to kind of develop a possibility that things can get better.
Yeah.
Um, there's people that benefit so much from their issues, that they're kind of reluctant to change that because they're getting kind of like a secondary gain
Yeah.
from the issues. Like, yeah.
I think of IFS where like Dick Schwartz calls it that the therapist is a hope merchant.
Oh, all
Yeah,
right.
that's his quote, but because he's trying to, I think sometimes what you're borrowing from your therapist is their own meaning making system that they believe maybe that you might get better or that there's hope for you or that you are good or loved or safe or like all of those like adaptive beliefs about the world and ourselves that like sometimes when people are really stuck or have gone through a lot they can't really their brain chemistry or whatever can't latch on to those messages on their own and so sometimes we are like sort of standing in the gap offering that even
Mm-hmm.
from like an intervention like you're doing hopeful feedback like oh this person is going to try to help me land in a place that's hopeful even if I can't feel it right now like
Yeah.
that's the that's what we're selling sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes like therapy is the first place where someone has gotten hopeful feedback regarding their life,
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
sometimes people's upbringing is full of like harsh feedback or no feedback or abusive feedback, but developing a relationship to where like, someone exposes themselves to a vulnerable situation, it doesn't turn out how it normally does with like terrible feedback, it allows for like more space to grow or like more space to recognize, okay, I do have independence here, or like autonomy to make my own decisions or to decide what is within my control and act on that, you know?
Yeah.
So
So that they can flourish.
yeah, yep. That's the name of the game.
I think of it like in the medical model because I'm like so in like the science of like physical medicine with the stuff I'm going through, but like there's like something that goes wrong physically in your body, and then you offer a treatment and then that gets better, like to heal it. But like in therapy, there's something emotionally or relationally or in your hope message or in your meaning making message that has not gone well, and you're trying to basically like help someone latch on to something better that will heal them psychologically, emotionally,
Hmm.
emotionally.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. There has to be like, I think there has to be a desire to heal,
Yeah.
you know? Yeah. So,
Yeah.
well, that's like mental health wise. I don't know if like you've come across anything like with physical healing or something like that, or like outcomes if people, or it's like placebo effects, I guess, people really believing that they can get better versus people who are like, no, this is the end.
I think it's the Wild West because, like, when people are vulnerable, if they're sick, everyone has a cure and a snake oil, and they want to charge money for like all these options, and it's an industry.
Mm.
But I also think that there probably are legitimate connections between brain body science and whether that's like meditation or set and setting, or like I was thinking about like getting this first round of infusions, and I'm like, maybe it would be good to like light a candle, like have some sort of like meaning making mantra, or like when you're doing psychedelics, or not that I've done that, but like, or ketamine, or like these other therapeutic things, like it's a big deal to have a good setting to administer them.
Mm-hmm.
Or with therapy, you need like warm blankets and like the psychology of getting the treatment as part of the benefit. And so then that makes me curious about these like infusion centers and the medical stuff. And wouldn't it be better if there was like calming spa music on and a warm blanket and the
Mm-hmm.
feeling like this medicine is going to heal you, like
Yeah.
placebo or not, I think it would be good.
Yeah. I came across a bunch of meditations for people receiving chemo, like, to listen to as like it's kind of like going in your body, and I don't know. It was the ones I listened to were like pretty soothing and like,
Yeah.
to create like a calming environment about it. They did not make the cut for my recommendations to you, but there is a market for them apparently.
Well, I have homework because I think I'm going to get a infusion tomorrow or Friday, and I want to like think through how I can make that
Yeah. There were a
good.
bunch on Insight Timer. Like if you
Oh, okay. I need to just look there.
yeah, I listened to a few of them. But I when I was listening to those, because like I was just like in this helpless state when you told me your news, and I was like, what can I do?
Yeah.
And so I started listening to meditations that I was sending to you. But the chemo ones, I was like, well, you're not there yet, and so they didn't seem relevant to
Yeah.
me at the time. But there were some good ones. Like there's some good high rated ones, so I don't know, maybe look there.
I've listened to the Tapping for Healing one like 20 times already. It's
Yes.
really good. I love what she says. I think
Yeah.
it's very, very good.
We'll have to put the link to that video in the description below. Like and subscribe.
Bonus if you made it to the end of this podcast.
Oh, we're not at the end yet. Let me share one more quote
Oh, good. Go ahead.
from Viktor
Got time.
Frankl. Okay. I have known people who rose to the challenge of enduring the most terrible afflictions and situations as long as they believed there was a point to their suffering.
Hmm.
Whether it was a family milestone they wanted to live long enough to share, or the prospect of doctors finding a cure by studying their illness, having a why to live for enabled them to bear the how.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. So when you were like, your question of like, what would Viktor Frankl say about like individuals kind of like pulling from these concepts, like, having your eyes set towards the future, or, having a why can kind of help you like find meaning in the suffering, or,
Yeah.
like you're talking about gratitude and stuff like that. Like having those moments that you're like, yes, like I am moving forward, or like yes, this is having a benefit in my body or something like that. Like, you know,
Ah,
yeah, it helps you endure the side effects, maybe.
yeah, I
So,
totally agree.
hmm
And I like that you can edit that for what works for you. So, like, my religious trauma brain goes straight to, like, well, you're enduring it because God thought you could handle it and was
mm,
teaching you a lesson. But, like, you don't need to believe that. You could, like you just said, like, you could believe that you're going to go get treatment because you want to be around for your kids and you love watching sunsets and it's meaningful to you to take medication and, like, get healthy so that it doesn't even have to be that big of a, like, ordeal. It doesn't have to be some super spiritual God thing. It can just be
hmm
like, I just want to be around for another couple of years. That sounds great to me, and that's so meaningful.
yeah,
So then you're like, well, sign me up. I want the medicine immediately.
yeah, yeah,
Good motivation.
yep. That helps you like kind of hold on to any type of prognosis, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And,
hmm
like, I think in his book, there was a variety of reasons people had meanings. Like,
hmm
some of them wanted to, like, go see their loved one. Some of them it was religious or spiritual. Some of them it was like whatever.
hmm
And it's so my hypothesis is that it doesn't necessarily matter what meaning making system you want, just find one.
Yeah. Yeah. hmm
Find a reason to be
Yeah.
alive.
hmm Yeah. There's this biblical concept of like fix your eyes on what's above because that's what's eternal. The earth will waste away, kind of stuff like that. And I used to use that a lot of time to like ignore my suffering because I'm like, oh, like, you know, better things are coming. Like, I'm just a speck. Who am I to, make a mountain out of a molehill or something like that
Yeah.
when we have eternity to look forward to. So like that concept could be used to dismiss feelings of like, suffering or something like that. But at the same time, depending on the person's mindset, that could be used to find meaning. So it's like the fine line between spiritual bypassing and using
Yes.
something as your why or like as a coping.
True.
So like that just like sentence can mean very different things for different people. Like, yeah, it can give you meaning, or it can like give you meaning in a way that you're like dismissing like any sort of negative emotion about it.
Okay, here's my thought about that
hmm
is that maybe there's like a correlation between it becomes spiritual bypassing more when your meaning pulls you out of the present moment. So I
Okay.
see spiritual bypassing more as people are saying, like, my suffering today doesn't matter because I'll go to heaven someday, and none of this matters, my physical body, my outcome, none of that matters because the future is what matters.
hmm
And whatever, you can believe that if you want, but that's more like shutting your eyes to today. And to me, especially for my own journey right now, like the present moment is the most important thing.
hmm
Like, what
Yeah.
do we have in this moment today that is good? And what is their gratitude? And what are you glad to be alive for? Like, live for this moment.
Yes. Uh-huh. Yep.
So, I don't know. That's an interesting question. Does spiritual bypassing pull you out of the present moment?
Yeah.
But
Well,
sometimes,
yeah.
yeah, my compassionate other answer is like, sometimes people just need to pull themselves out of the present moment.
Yeah, sometimes that's all
You know?
you have. Like,
Yeah.
I think spiritual bypassing for me is a complicated topic because uh like part of me wants to write it off as like that's so primitive. But on the other hand,
I
like
agree.
sometimes that's all that is getting someone through something,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
like sometimes your Maslow's hierarchy is so torn down like on the lower levels that like some of the reflection that comes with the upper levels has to go on pause. So like
I agree.
if any type of coping skill gets you through something, like, yeah, okay. However, I don't think it's fair when like people are expected to do it alongside those people, or
Oh, that's valid. Yeah.
yeah,
Where we like tell people to spiritually bypass or
yeah,
instruct them to focus on the future. Like if that's what they need in the moment, do it.
yeah, Yeah.
But let's not prescribe that for anyone if they need to be
Yeah.
in the present moment. And that's like very Carl Rogers of you to
Yeah.
say, like, what does that particular person need in that moment?
Yeah. Or just like watching some people like publicly grieve stuff,
Yeah.
and then there's this kind of implication of like, oh, I would totally be handling that the wrong way because I'm not handling it with like the type of spiritual grace that this person is,
Yeah.
So, or it's like, I feel that you have to be careful what you say at funerals, because there's, every time people abuse this verse of like, God gives and God takes away, blessed be the name of the Lord. Like, okay, that again, one sentence means a world to different people, but to me, sometimes like, saying something like that out of context is really dismissive and disrespectful of a person's like very valid up and down grieving process, So it's like, no, we're afraid of the doubts that could come in this valley. So just remember, God gives and God takes away. So you have to be okay with that. Like,
Yeah.
that's not good advice. Like,
Yeah.
just like as the grieving process, like biologically takes place, and stuff like that. Like, and then in my mind's like, okay, there's another Bible verse to answer that. Like, there's a season for everything, a time to be born, a time to die, and stuff. And I don't know, I can really grasp onto that because like that provides some flexibility. It provides space for the grieving instead of just like it was God's will. So, you should be grateful for that. Like, yeah, that takes someone out of the present moment. Like, you know, change your emotion to have this one. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I find it super problematic, like many things.
It's
But
problematic when people insert their opinion about it as a constant, like, belief system.
yeah,
Because, yeah, like maybe somebody is deep in grief and that verse brings them comfort. But when someone says it at a funeral, like to a random group of strangers, it's like that's not going to land well for some of those people. So you
yeah,
might want to not say that.
yeah, right, yeah,
Maybe to say, I'm thinking of you. This is hard. I love you. Like,
yeah,
can we not just like work on that?
yeah. How can I support you?
Hmm.
Yeah, hmm
Again,
it's
with us in this industry knowing like all the hurtful things people say, and you're like, let us help you.
yeah, yeah. Oh, well, that's that.
There
We
it is.
we solved it. We solved it all. This is meaning making in the present.
I need a follow-up one with you after you finish the second half of the book, and maybe I should like reread mine because I kind of forgot because now I'm curious about it.
Yes.
And okay, a second one, if we were going to do it, would also have a quick, like, interesting research of Frankl and Rogers and who was palling around with who as they were thinking of all these things. That'd be fun.
Sure. Yeah. That's a good
Okay.
topic.
Well, someday.
Um, I need to look back through because he does mention like people that he was doing research with that like, they had this concept, I had this one, and so we parted ways and stuff like that. But I didn't realize like all these people were from Austria.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's like a lot of researchers and philosophers. Nietzsche, is that how I say it? I'm going to sound so. There's all these different philosophers that were like rooted out of Germany and Austria that have really impact our like Western civilization's thoughts.
Yes. Yeah. It's so interesting to me.
Me
Like, yeah.
Okay,
So,
well, sometime later. Goodbye, listener. This was
okay.
lovely.
Yes. To be continued.
Okay.